Hello and welcome to my channel. Thank you for joining me today. We're going to be doing a foxglove, and today I'm going to be doing it using the Derwent tinted charcoal. I've used these a few times now and I really like them. If you didn't see the initial review that I did of them, I'll put the link to that up here. So there are a few nice muted colours. Let me just see. We've got 12 colours there, and like I say, quite muted, quite suited to landscapes around here with these nice colours. Probably more suited to an English landscape than to something, you know, Mediterranean where you'd want more bright colours. So I'm not sure how we're going to go about getting the foxglove nice and pink. I might add something else later on, or I might just keep it a little bit more muted. But today I'm going to be using them with water. So I did do this in the first review, but I haven't done it since, because it did say on the advert for them that you could use them with water. So I'm going to do that with the background. So make the background move further away by having it very muted and very subtle, and then make the flower a lot brighter and a lot more in the foreground. So this is another photograph from Pixabay, which you know I use quite a lot. I'll put the link down below to this photograph for the reference. So I'll just pop that out of the way. So I've already drawn it. Well, actually, I'll bring it back and just show you. So the main things that you need to look at when you start off with your drawing are, just to begin with, put one big line down here just to get that shape. So look at where the stem starts on the photograph there, and look at where you're going to there. You're going quite a way across. Nice big line down, and then just put the individual flowers on as you're going down. So look carefully at the shapes. So we've got this sort of leaf covering over the flower. So the buds at the top, you've got a couple of leaves, and then this very rounded end to where the petals are going to unfurl. Further down, they're much more open, and this is where the bell shape comes in. You've got this lovely sweeping curve here and these open parts here. So just look very carefully at the shapes here, which way that curve's going and that curve, and get these nice open shapes. I've actually made them quite a bit bigger than on the photograph, just to emphasise these nice open shapes at the bottom here. And then again, these are quite distinct shapes. We've got the shape of the ones that have lost the flower, that have finished flowering, and they're starting to make a little seed head there. So make sure again you get that curving and all these little bits of leaves that are going around the side. So very distinctive, and obviously the weight of these flowers is making them all come this way. It may be a little bit windy actually as well. A lot of these grasses in the background are going that way. Okay, so I'll just pop that out of the way. So I've drawn the flower, but I haven't drawn anything else. So what I'm going to do now is put an imaginary landscape behind. So I'm going to come about a third of the way down with my hills and just make them completely out of my head. So a hill there, maybe some more hills a little bit nearer to us. And then some fields coming down, maybe a lane or something. Just lines at the moment, really. And that's enough for now. We'll just leave that as it is. And then I'll just make that into a field going across. Just put a bit more structure. Okay, so that's it. Just one or two very light pencil lines. So we'll begin with the sky, and if I look at the colours here, I'm trying to think which colours I used last time, but I'll go with this one to begin with. So this one's called Natural, and we want, it's sort of a greyish sky. Like I say, looking out now, it's very grey. We've not got any sun in the sky. I'm just adding colour, but I'm going to wet this and blend it all together. So I'm just going to add a little touch of colour here and there, as if it's maybe the underside of some clouds. We'll leave a bit of white paper as well, maybe for some clouds. But we're not having a sunny day. Like I said, quite a subtle, very English weather. So we'll add a tiny touch of blue. So we've got two blues. We've got Mountain Blue, and we've got this one which is Ocean Deep, which looks very ultramarine if you look at it. A little bit dark, but like I say, a dark day, we'll just put a tiny touch of blue in a few places. And because this is from the imagination, it doesn't matter where you're putting these colours. That's entirely up to you, or indeed how much colour you're putting on. Just make sure you don't go over your flower. So that's enough. We've got grey and we've got blue, and now we're going to get some water and just nicely blend that together. So this is a mixed media pad again, the one I've used quite a lot in the past, the Gear Staker one. So it's not a watercolour paper, it's just a mixed media paper. So, but we're not using heaps of water, we're not going to be sloshing water around, so it should be just enough just to make this little background in the charcoal. So you can see how those colours are blending together quite nicely. And keep your brush strokes horizontal with the sky. Maybe one or two curves here and there. If you move your arm to get a few curves in, it just give you the impression of some sweeping clouds going across. So really we're just putting a tint of colour in the sky, we're not making that the focal point of the picture, because the focal point wants to be the flower. So at this stage we need to paint around this flower. But don't worry if you do go over the edge of your flower, because you're going to have much stronger colour, don't forget, on your flower than you've got in the background, so mistakes can be corrected. Now you can see quite a bit of texture still from where I initially put on the charcoal. If you don't like that effect, what you could do, and what I'll perhaps try in a minute in the mountains, is to blend it a little bit with your finger before you put the water on. I actually don't mind it. Gives a bit of variety, and I think probably if you keep adding more water and keep working it more, you will get rid of some of that texture. Just be aware where you leave a line when you're doing it like this, you're going to get an edge to that line. Can you see there where you know where the water stops? You're making some lines, so we're making it as if we've got a sky that's sweeping across. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that, and then we're going to the hills. So I'm going to use some of the same grey on the hills, because again I don't want them jumping too far forward, but I'm going to press on a bit heavier and get a bit more colour. So with your lines, vary them, vary the direction of where you're going with your colour. Perhaps the hills going that way. You know, hills don't just go in that direction, they come towards us and away from us as well. So just get a bit of variety in the direction of some of these lines that you're putting down. It's a nice thing to do, is do some distant hills completely out of your head and not worry about copying a photograph at all. And if you go darker in places, that's going to give either shadows or the shape of the lay of the land. So we'll go over to this side, again carefully going around the flower. You see I've not got that much point on this charcoal. You can sharpen them, but you're never going to get a real sharp point, and have used them quite a bit and blended them quite a bit, so they're perhaps ready for a sharpening. Okay, so, and we'll also add some sort of purple colour to that, I think. So again, to make them go further back, we've got this one called Lavender, which is quite pretty. And we may need to use this in the foreground in the flower itself, unless we decide to do that with something more vibrant and go for a different medium. So just the two colours in that furthest away hill, and again I'll get some water and blend that together. Oh, actually what we said we were going to do was in an area was blend it with our finger a little bit first, just to see if that made it less textured. I don't want to get rid of all that texture, because it's going to give us some of the form of the hills. It's all just experimenting. I have used them a few times, but I've not used them, you know, loads. It's still getting used to knowing how they work. So again, with your brush, again, follow those lines that you've already made earlier. Vary the direction of your brush as you varied the direction of your charcoal pencils. And if you did want to leave one or two areas dry, like here, it's just going to give you a bit more shape to that distant mountain as well. So I think that's worked quite well, just leaving one or two areas a little bit drier. And you get a nice edge where the water comes to, and you leave the edge dry, leave a little bit dry there, you get a nice edge of a darker colour. So you can use that as a directional line or an edge to the mountain. So should we move on to greens? I'll still put some of the grey in and mix a little bit of green in a moment as well. Coming forward. So what I think I'll do now is I'll perhaps speed up this video and I'll come right down to the foreground using brighter colours as I come along. So I'll use let me see which, we've got a nice sand and some of the greens. That looks greeny, it's mountain blue actually. Let me see, these are the greens. So we've got green moss, that's a nice colour, the peat, and we've got dark moss, so two greens. So bring more yellow into the foreground as well. But I will speed it up as I go along, and then you're not getting bored watching me do the same process over and over. As you could see there, I just carried on the same sort of method, adding some colours, then adding a little bit of water to blend them together a bit. And I've put in the foreground some more vertical lines to give us an impression of grasses, and I've left them a little bit drier just to make it more of a foreground. I'm just looking there now, that needs to just be tidied up a little around there. But I'm thinking now I'm going to put that water away. We're not going to use any more water on it. Put the brushes away, and we're just going to do the foxglove using pencils and these charcoals. Now, initially I thought I wanted to do the whole thing in these charcoals, but looking at the colours there, it's so vibrant. I really don't want to just use these charcoals. They're not going to be the right colours. So I'll use them to begin with a little bit for the stem and just start and get a little bit of form in. And again, I will keep fast forwarding this as we go along, and then you're not getting too bored watching. It's very pale in places, so don't overdo it with the green, because it's a very subtle, I don't know what you call it really, very pastely. It's a lot of white in that, white and yellow in that stem as well. So just add a tiny touch coming all the way down, and we can blend this into the other colours afterwards. And start and look at the form of some of these leaves and things as well. Not sure what's gone on here. I think I've left a bit of mounting that should have been mounting. Or no, it's that edge of that petal. Let me just see. Yeah, that bit there should be mounting. So let me just go back and get the grey. Don't know what I've done there. So needed to be a bit more stronger with my pencil lines in the beginning, I think, so that we knew exactly where the flower was. That's better. So you can correct as you go along. The other thing about using this green is it's going to blend very much into the background, so that's another reason for using some brighter colours, so we don't lose all this in the background. So let me just have a look. So I have this tin of all sorts of different pencils that I've had over the years, and Crimson Lake, that's quite a nice one. I've got another one of those actually, Crimson, yeah, so that's again the Derwent one, Crimson Lake, which I thought would be a nice colour for the tips of these flowers. So if you don't have any crayons or watercolours that you want to add any brighter colours with, you could carry on and do the whole thing in the charcoal. Like I say, make it very muted. And there are a couple of pinky tones. There's the, let me see, lavender, and what's this one called? Glowing Embers. And if you added some white to them, you could make them a little bit lighter. So that's what I would advise if you've just got the charcoals and you haven't got anything else, you can add two to make them a bit brighter. So as you saw there, I was using the pencil both to make the form and also to start and build up some tones. So varying the pressure, pressing down a little bit harder where I wanted it a bit darker, and to give us some of those lines. So if you look, you can see that we've got very distinctive lines coming down them. So keep your pencil marks all going in that direction and follow those lines as you're going. And like I say, vary the pressure, and then we've got some darker areas and some lighter areas. So I'll move now to a green, and I'm going to go for, like I said, it's a very pale green. So let's have a see what I've got in here. That might be quite nice. So what's that one? Mineral green. So let's just have a look at this. Yeah, that's quite nice. Like I said, because it's brighter than the background, it's sort of starting to build it up a bit. And bring this foxglove forward. But don't press on too heavily with this, because you want some of that white paper still showing through, because it's very well lit. And if you look carefully, some of these little bits of leaves that are going over the tops of these buds have actually also got a little bit of tinge of red in them as well. Which often happens with plants that are red and purpley. They've got a little tinge in the stems and the leaves as well. So not looking back too much at the photograph at the moment, really, just looking at this picture and following these earlier pencil lines, getting some form into it. And we will have to bring some yellow into this, because if you look at these little buds at the bottom, well, they're not buds, are they? Sorry, seed pods at the bottom. There's quite a lot of yellow in there. So again, at the bottom here, get a bit more pressure on your pencil to start and build up some of that shape where it's darker. It's quite a spherical shape. It needs some shadow in to get that sphere. Okay, so we will get a yellow, and that looks like a nice warm yellow. So what's that one called? Deep cadmium. You'll notice under the stem here there's a lot more going on than I've got in the actual photograph. I've just kept it quite simple, put the emphasis more on these flowers. Okay, and we need some shadows in really on these flowers, so we need to go a lot darker. So we won't go with the crimson lake, we'll get a more purpley colour on top, or blue maybe. So imperial purple, and we'll use this where we want it to look more in shadow. and that's a watercolour one. You can tell it's going on. I just have this tin of all sort of random crayons that I've ended up with. Some of them are watercolour ones and some aren't, and this one's nice and soft, so it's blending more as I'm putting it on. So really look now at your picture where those shadows are, where the lines are that need defining. So this one's casting a lot of shadow on itself on this bottom petal. I'm just feeling that we're not pink enough. We're a little bit more purpley than pink, so I'm going to add some pink on. So this is a magenta. I just think it needs the whole thing sort of bringing together. So I'm going to go over the two colours that we've already put on with this magenta. Again, still leaving a little bit of white showing. At the same time blending those colours together. Okay, and before I go any further, I need to get those dark spots inside the flower. So let me just have a look. They're not that dark. They're not, you know, black. So I've got this is a copper beech. And they're not completely uniform or circular. Some of them are more oval shaped. Some are smaller than others. And then what I'm going to do is make some, because you can use, if you look at them, you can see that it's white around those spots, whatever you want to call them. So just make that effect by just doing a little bit of negative painting around those dots that we've just put in, negative drawing. And I'm just going to get some blue now. So what have we got here? It just says blue actually. That's a Crayola one. This isn't a Derwent one. And I'm going to look at where it's the absolute darkest. We've got the darkest shadows, and I'm going to add that to that purple that we put on before, just to go a little bit darker and get a bit more definition. But I'm not going to overdo it with this blue. Very dark under here. It's cast, this top one's casting a shadow on the one behind. So I'm just finishing now with the flowers with just one or two lines just to reinforce those flower shapes. And you could obviously spend a lot more time than me getting a lot more detail in and building it up. Like I've said before, I tend to work quite quickly when I'm doing these videos, just to give you ideas, but you know, you can spend quite considerably more time building up the flower shapes and the tones, looking at where the shadows are, looking at the highlights. If you did want to get some, if you'd lost some white and you wanted to get some back, you could always use a white pencil to do that as well. So looking at it now, I'm not overly happy with the foreground around here. This bottom part of the foreground. So I think what I'm going to do is go over that with some pencil. So we've got tan. Just to make it look a bit more uniform. It looks a bit, well, the word I was thinking was scratty, if that's a word. I'm also going to add a little bit of pink in, as if maybe we've got one or two more foxgloves in the distance. And that's better already, actually. So there's always ways of correcting things if you're not happy with them. So I'm going to get that pink that we had earlier and just put a touch of pink. And if you wanted to do some more flowers, like I say, a completely imaginary background, you can do what you like. Just think having that extra bit of colour in the foreground makes it a little bit more harmonious. Just sharpen up the edge. So that's another thing you can do, is just sharpen up the edge of one or two. Perhaps not outline them all and make them too illustrative. Well, it's quite illustrative, isn't it? I think it's quite nice as it is. Okay, but you could carry on and build up that foreground, make more of a, make more of that. Add extra foxgloves in if you wanted to. I think actually now I'm looking at it again, I want to be a little bit darker in the foreground. So let's find a nice dark green. Actually, we'll go back to the green of the charcoal. So that was the peat, so it's that one, isn't it? Because underneath all this grass here, you would be casting shadows on itself, so it just wants a bit of definition in the base here, I think. Okay, so I think I need to stop fiddling now and leave it at that. So it's turned out to be quite a pretty little picture, and like I say, you could spend a lot more time putting more detail in. I'd be interested to know if you've got these charcoal pencils, how you like using them, if you like using them just to draw with, or if you like blending them with your finger, or doing as I've done and adding the water to them. The thing about this background with this technique of adding the water, you could then go in and draw on top of that and do some tree lines and more things and just gradually keep building it up. And the pencil's gone quite nicely on top of it as well. Here where I put extra pencil on the grass, it just sat quite nicely on top of that charcoal that we'd put up with the water there. So an interesting way to use them, I think, and like I say, if you've got any more ideas, if you want to put them in the comments below. So thank you very much for joining me today, and we'll be back again soon. Bye for now.